So it's time to put the rangefinders back on the camera bodies. So the body here is all prepped and ready to go. This is camera number 1. And I've got the rangefinder for camera number 1 here. The only thing I haven't done to this yet is put a little tiny spot of clear lacquer to lock the frame selector frame at that point. So I'll do that first of all. So I've got some clear nail polish here. I'll put a tiny drop there and there. That's all that's required. It's just to stop that from rattling loose. It's held firmly with 2 screws that hold that clamp. And that's ready to go back in the camera body. Now, to prepare it to go into the camera body, you can see I've squeezed this almost all the way closed, and I've put a lock screw through in this position. You can put a screw in there, if you can find one in your box of spare parts, that'll hold that in position. So this is rigid at the moment, and it's easy to put back in the camera body. So you've got a better idea of what we're trying to achieve. I've got this stray body here, and I've put enough pieces back in here so that the rangefinder will work. So this is our rangefinder arm, and the pin on the back of the shutter assembly acts on this. This is pivoted top and bottom, and it acts on the arm of the rangefinder at this point. It acts on that cam surface there. This is a roller on the tip of the arm, so it moves quite smoothly. And you can see it moves through quite an arc there, and that is from the closest focal distance at about that position, where this arm is pretty much parallel to the body, down to the other end of the arc, where that roller is coming towards the end of that cam surface. And that would take you from close focus through to infinity. You'll notice that as I move this, you can see this arm here moving. That's moving the parallax correction mask at this point. We've also got the frame selector in here. Now the frame selector acts on the collar, the brass collar on the back of the shutter around this rangefinder pin. It acts on this piece here. And as it moves this arm from this point, it moves the little arm here in the rangefinder mechanism. You watch that. And that in turn is shifting the mask up and down inside here, which exposes or covers the various frame lines for the different focal lengths of lens. So that's what we need to do. We need to get everything back in place. And as I say, the easiest way to do it is have the arm on that rangefinder held back with a screw. But you don't have to do it like that. Right, so to prepare the camera so we can get the rangefinder back in, first we need to make sure that the roller visible in here, you can just about here you can see it, is fully forward, which means the pin is fully forward in the body. Then we can get the rangefinder to swing into position. So as we get the rangefinder in position, this fork at the bottom on our frame selector thing, well actually it's the depth, it's the frame selector, that has to couple with the pin on the arm, this arm. See if I can get that hooked in there. Yeah, that's it. So that rangefinder would be seated at that point. This fork is connected up to the pin on the frame selector. The arm is back behind the roller, so that's all good. and the rangefinder would just need to be screwed back down to the body at this stage. Now normally I put a touch of lacquer underneath it so that it is very unlikely to move at all. So I'll just take this back out, put some lacquer on there, and we'll screw it down into place. Just lift that back out. Put a little drop of lacquer on that in a couple of spots near the screw holes. And that's just so that once it's all screwed down tight, it's not going to rattle loose. That wouldn't stop us from getting it loose if we wanted to take it off the camera. Make sure that roll is fully forward. Slide the rangefinder in and get that pin seated into the frame selector, like that. That's it. We've got 2 screws for this. One of them you can place in from the front fairly easily. You can get to that. Just be careful that you're not hitting the front surface mirror. Run that screw down lightly. Its mate, we've got to drop in from the top. And if you're lucky, it falls into place straight away. It more or less has. That's it. I'm just holding the rangefinder down, and I'll tighten those 2 screws up. Final act is to remove that screw that was locking the rangefinder. You saw it immediately shifted as soon as I took that screw out. And that's the rangefinder back in the camera body. So the brass collar at the front here, if I catch my fingernail on that, that selects our frame selector. You'll see the arm moving at this point. The pin itself moves the arm, and you'll see how that moves that front element of the rangefinder system there. So that rangefinder's back in the camera, and all that's left to do with that now is check alignment to make sure that it's correct for vertical and horizontal alignment. Here's a lens that's all serviced and ready to go, which we can use for our purposes here for adjusting the rangefinder. As you can see, as I swing the focus on the lens here, you can see the front lens here moving from the infinity position through to the close focus position. So now I'll look out the window and see what I see. I'm interested in 2 things. The alignment, I want the images to be correctly aligned. I use an infinity target for that. So as I swing this round to the infinity position, just at the point the focus scale moves to the infinity position, I should see the images converge in the finder. I should also see the correct frame selected here for the 50mm lens that's currently fitted. Well, that's a bit of an anticlimax, that one, because it's selecting the correct frames and the focus is spot on, which is unexpected and unlooked for, really. So I don't have to do any more with this rangefinder. That's all good. All I need to do now is put the top cover on this camera and we're ready to go. So I'll just have a quick look at that. Right, I've blown all the dust out of the top cover, and I'm just checking now to make sure that the adjustment of the film release is correct. And that feels really good. I'll check my frame counter to make sure it's only moving one frame with each stroke and that the numbers are fairly centered. No, that moved 2 frames, so I've got to make an adjustment to the frame counter. So I'll lift the top back off carefully, don't want to disturb the meter. I'll zoom you in a bit. So basically the arm here is being pulled too far forward with each stroke of the film advance. So if I wind that screw in some distance, we'll see how we go. We're at least a full frame too much, so I've wound that in probably about 3 turns. I'll try it and report back. Okay, now you can see the frame counter moves 1 frame and the number is quite well centered in the notch. So that part's dealt with. I need to put the meter settings button and its spring back on there now. One last look at the rangefinder, make sure I haven't left any fingerprints all over it. There's the settings button. Slide the top cover into position over the button and get the screws in the top cover. And one on the end here. Now, one final check, make sure that the buttons all move smoothly, the shutter release and the film release, that the meter settings button also moves smoothly, and I can put the rewind knob in place. So there's the sleeve that goes over it, and the rewind knob, for reasons I'm not sure of, hasn't been reassembled yet. We'll just do that. So I'll just wipe a bit of synthetic grease onto the wavy washer. I'll pop that around there. Put the knob over the top. And here's the screw that goes through, and I've got the tool I use for putting that in place. Check that the dial will move, that the pointer can be adjusted. Bring the camera back into the picture. spin that into place, something through the fork of the rewind, stop it turning. Just use my fingers to do that up tight. So there's our top cover all back in place, and this camera is ready pretty much to have its leatherettes put back in place, but we won't be doing that yet. I want to deal with the rangefinder on camera number 3, and we'll see if that gives us any problems or anything interesting to show you. Okay, here's the rangefinder for camera number 3. So first thing I did was close the rangefinder up. Now you'll probably find that the arm decouples here. That has to go over that pin, so you might need to push and pull at that to get it to drop into place. But holding that together, I'll use that screw I used earlier to lock that arm in place. That one's not doing it for me. I wonder whether that arm's thicker on this camera. I'll find another one. I'm sure that's what I used for the other camera. Well, with a slightly longer screw, that did the job for me nicely. So that rangefinder is also set up ready to go in the camera body. Let's pop that to one side and bring in camera body, camera number 3. So you already know the drill. We've got to push that arm with the roller all the way forward so that the rangefinder arm will go behind it. Then as I slide the rangefinder into the body, this arm here, with that small pin sticking out of it, this arm has to couple with the slot in this piece here. And that just fell into place. And at that point I'd put my 2 screws in, do them up, and remove the screw from the end here. Of course I haven't put any lacquer on that yet, so we'll do that. Make sure that roller's all the way far to the front. Drop this into place. Make sure that that pin is correctly coupled into that slot on the arm for our frame finder. And that's looking good. I'll place screw number 1 and go in from the front here. Screw number 2 has to be dropped in from the top. And I can look from the front now and see if it fell into the hole properly. It didn't, but it's in there now. Alright, the screwdriver's dropped into the slot. I'm running the screw home. do the other screw up. Now I'll remove the screw from the end here that was locking the rangefinder, and that screw is most definitely longer than the one I was able to use on the other camera, which is interesting. So now what have we got? I'll put a lens on the front. I'll use the same lens as I used for the other camera. Line up the red dots, rotate, that clicks into place. We're watching this, and the frame selector, well, the frame selector won't move because the lens is on there, but we should see the parallax correction here working. That's certainly all moving. So the only question is it accurate? So I better find out. Okay, camera number 2. The rangefinder in this one, the horizontal alignment is pretty good. It looks to be just about spot on again, but the vertical alignment is out. When I look through the finder, the moving image, the image that moves when you move the focusing, the lens here, that one is clearly showing high compared to the fixed image. So we need to make an adjustment. Now this camera, that's the one where this mirror was loose. There's two ways you can adjust for vertical alignment. One is by shifting the position of the semi-silvered mirror. It's awkward, it's exceptionally touchy, it's difficult to get that right. And the other way is by moving this front lens group here up or down on the arms. There's a little bit of adjustment there. So which direction do you need to move it? Well, in this case, what I did was I just put my finger on the top of that front arm, pressed downwards slightly, kept some pressure on it. You could see that the images, instead of converging, they diverged even further. In other words, the moving image rose in the finder. If I press down on that, the moving image rose in the finder. So that tells me that I've got to lift this front group up, and that should take the image back down to match. So how do you go about doing that? Well, let's see if we can get this. I'll just bring my focus round to the close focused end of the scale so I can get at it easily. There's a screw here and a screw on the opposite side. So I'm going to slacken those screws slightly, and then I'm going to lift that lens. So I'll show you how I do that. First I've got to get the screws slightly loose. That wasn't tight. Suggest someone's been here at that before. We'll just swing that to the infinity position so I can get at this screw easily. Likewise, that was not tight. So now what do I want to do? Well, we want to raise this lens up slightly. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to take the scalpel blade and slide it in under there. At both ends, and then check and see what the alignment's like. It's still very high. That front lens group won't go up any higher than that, so that tells me I'm going to have to make my adjustment by slackening that screw off and moving the position of the bracket that holds the semi-silvered mirror, which is not my preferred method. I've removed the rangefinder from camera number 2. I'm going to have to move that mirror, of course, as I mentioned. But while I was checking it, I noticed that this was the rangefinder that had the extra lines, bright lines, visible in the finder. And they relate to scratches on that film behind there. So I'm going to take this apart now. We've got, this is the moving plate that gives us our frame lines, and I'm seeing if I can take this apart, take this arm off, and hopefully expose that film surface so I can blacken out the offending bright lines. I'm not sure whether getting these two screws off is going to do it for me. No, that's just taking the bracket off the back, so I'm no closer to getting that apart. I'll just move this stuff away. In an ideal world I'd separate these components, but this piece here is all riveted together. This post here and here, two on this side, one on that side, are riveted in to the plate at this point. I really don't like my chances of getting those rivets out, and I'd have no rivets to replace them if I drilled them out. So I'm going to hold this up to the light and see if I can figure out where the damage is on the film through here, and what I can do, if I can see it, is take a tiny dot of black paint on the end of a pin and just paint the line out that's showing. Unfortunately, I think it's through here. I don't think I can actually see it easily. So I'll have to hold this up to the light and see what I can see. The clear patches in this film, that's where you get bright lines on the finder. Of course, there's a pattern of clear lines, and they are exposed or covered by this moving plate as you put a different lens in. How did they come to be damaged? Well, most likely someone has poked something through here. Perhaps they were moving the screen up and down with the tip of the tweezers or something like that, and they've damaged it that way. That's one way it might have happened. Or it might just be spontaneous, that film is, the emulsion on it is just degenerated in some fashion. Oh, if I can't do anything with this, I've got two options. Either live with the extra marks in the finder, which certainly won't kill anyone, or see if I've got another finder here that's got a better screen in it that I can use. So there's nothing here for you to see, unfortunately. It's all too tiny. I've got to hold this up to the light with some strong magnification, see if I can see where the problem lies. This is camera number 2. I'm just making some finer adjustments to the rangefinder, and the vertical alignment's good. That's good now, but the horizontal alignment's not as good as it might be. The images go past the conversion point at the infinity position, so I'm just going to adjust that. And the adjustment for the horizontal alignment is here. This screw is your lock screw. This screw is your adjustment screw. So I'll slacken off that lock screw. Just need to break it so that it's not dead tight. And here's my adjustment screw here. And I need to adjust it so that the arm is pulled further forward. That's very tight. Try a bigger screwdriver on that. Things aren't moving at all. Make sure my lock screw's not too tight. That's better. Now I've just moved that slightly, I rotated that slightly clockwise. I'll check out the window and see what I've got. Well, we're certainly moving in the right direction, but I'm not quite there. I've got to the point where the images converge when I turn the lens to the infinity position. But they converge too early. I'll check again. Now the images are converging there, and I am almost at the infinity position, but not quite on my focus scale. Well, it's moving, but not much. I'm not sure that I'm winning with this one. No, if anything, it's gone back the other way. Let me try moving this back. Now I've really gone bad. It's like I'm not getting quite enough movement there, like the eccentric cam's not eccentric enough. That's pretty good. I'm still not quite getting that to come just at the infinity position. Oh, that's it. That's it. Just as the focus scale ring reaches the infinity position, the images are aligned. So I'll just check that again after locking off the lock screw. That's most important because the setting can shift sometimes when you lock it. Now that's it. So my horizontal alignment was done by loosening up the lock screw and rotating this screw, which is eccentric, and it swings this upper arm on the main arm, and that changes the relationship of the front lens here to the rod coming through from the front of the camera. So that part's all good, and my horizontal alignment, my vertical alignment rather, was already good, and that has not moved. So this particular camera, which was camera number 2, I've dealt with the rangefinder on that now. On these cameras, I don't typically lock the settings with lacquer. I know that's fairly common practice. I don't think they're likely to move by themselves. They're just not under a lot of tension or force. There's just no reason for them to do so. So if they're done up tight, generally on these cameras, they're going to stay there. And if you do apply some lacquer to lock the screws, that's fine, but choose a contrasting colour so that the next technician in there can tell that lacquer is present, and then they can put a drop of acetone or something on there before they try moving the screws.